about the question how to make the European Union a strategic actor. This set of seminars is supported economically by Ministry of Defense of the government of Spain, and FAES Foundation will try in this seminar and the next two seminars to talk about, from the different angles, about the possibility and opportunity for the European Union to become a strategic actor. It is clear that the European Union needs to become a strategic actor for several reasons. Among them, I would like to highlight this engagement of the United States from European security, the increasingly unstable European strategic environment that will see growing threats like jihadism, Islamist radicalization, migratory pressure from Africa, cybercrime, Russian expansionism, and so on, so, as well as the rivalry between the great powers that may turn Europe into an observer rather than an active participant. So today we will talk how and first of all, can the European Union be strategic actor without having a vision, a common vision on foreign policy, and how the European Union can become strategic actor in increasingly hostile context of the European Union. So for this debate, I know we have only something more than 1 hour, but we really count with 4 extraordinary panelists, and I will very shortly introduce them. First, I would like to welcome Dr. Ulrike Franke. She's Senior Policy Fellow of European Council on Foreign Relations. Joanna Moring, she's researcher on European and defense security. Also welcomes to Roberto Menotti. He's editor-in-chief of Aspenia Online and deputy editor of Aspenia. And last but not least, Ignacio Cosido is here with us. He's currently director of the Center for International Security of the University Francisco de Vitoria in Madrid. So please, I will start with Ulrike, and first of all, I will give you to everyone, for each of you, first 8-10 minutes to talk, if you can, national vision of your countries on this concept of European strategy, or possibility of the European Union to become strategic actor. So please, Ulrike, the floor is yours, and thank you very much to join us.
Thank you so much, Mira, and a wonderful good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so this is obviously a really important discussion. Although, as I think it has also been mentioned in the announcement, sometimes this discussion can seem a bit repetitive in the sense that we seem to be talking about this over and over again. However, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because the way that the EU works is that, you need to talk about things over and over again, and this is how you create movement. And I do believe that when it comes to the EU as a strategic actor, there has been some movement over the last few years and decade. So yeah, we've been asked to kind of present our country's positions. So I'll start with the German one. Obviously, I don't talk for the German government, neither past, present, or future. As you know, there is a bit of a change happening. This is my assessment. But I thought I'll make 3 points to start with, including the last one related to the elections we just had and what role they may play. So the first point I wanted to make is that in Germany, there's definitely really quite an enormous lip service being paid to the EU as a strategic actor. So I think it is quite important to note that approval and support for the European Union in Germany remains high, both among the population and among the political parties. Of course, I'm generalizing a bit and there are outliers, but overall, Germany is a very pro-European country. And especially in the political realm, you know, the kind of four parties in the center that really matters outside the two fringes definitely support the EU and also support the EU as a strategic actor. So this narrative, this ideal of saying, yeah, no, the EU really should be stronger in foreign policy and possibly defense policy, is something that's definitely popular and quite often repeated. I would say, though, that it is, from its approach, somewhat different to France, and Johanna will talk about France in a second, in the sense that, you know, kind of generalizing a bit, France wants the EU to be a strategic actor because of its kind of geopolitical clout and the geopolitical impact it can bring. Germany, I want to say, has a bit more of a romantic vision almost of the EU as the kind of force for good in the world. But in the end, you know, the kind of idea remains the same. And something I always like to emphasize, because I find it so striking, when you look at all the party programs, the party manifestos that the parties put out before the elections and that kind of guide their thinking, all of them don't only mention the EU and EU foreign policy and all of this, they all mention, the main parties all mention the European army, right? And support for eventually having some kind of common European armed forces, however that's going to look like, and what it's going to look like is everyone's best guess, to be honest. But we definitely have that. I would say, you know, a kind of positive reading is this, that, you know, Germany supports all of this and is a great supporter and everything is great. I have to say I have a slightly more cynical reading of all of this, which is that Germans largely support doing things at the EU level, especially when it comes to the military and defense realm, because then they don't have to do it at the national level, because they tend not to want to do this, neither, you know, military stuff, nor kind of geopolitical taking of a strong position. So that was point A. Point B, or second point, is when it comes to kind of actual steps of making European or turning the EU into a strategic actor, Germany's position isn't quite so clear as it is, you know, in rhetoric. Now, I think there has been some movement. So all the main German parties actually support introducing majority voting in Europe, in the European Council when it comes to foreign policy. And I think that maybe that is due to a bit of a realization that trying to always have everyone on board, so always convince all 27 and make sure that all 27s are on board, may be difficult to make happen. However, and this is important, always having all 27 on board has very much been the German, or at least the Merkel way over the last few years, right? Of course, there were kind of exceptions and we can talk about those, but broadly speaking, one of the things that Merkel always tried is to have the smaller member states involved to make sure that everyone is kind of included, and a lot of smaller member states also have appreciated this. And what we see, and ECFR has done a bunch of polling on this, what we see is that quite a few Europeans are very much in favor of Germany taking on a stronger leadership position. And I think it is very much because they kind of feel like, okay, yeah, that this means that we will be heard and we won't be forgotten. The problem, of course, is that if this is your approach, you get a smallest common denominator situation, right? A smallest common denominator outcome, because if everyone needs to agree, you kind of, you know, water every decision down to the lowest level. And that is kind of the opposite of being a strategic actor. You know, being a strategic actor means taking some positions on things and not always kind of watering it down. And so so far what we've seen is that Germany has rarely, if ever, taken leadership positions on strategic questions. And in fact, we've had a really fascinating poll recently where we asked, it was run in 60 member states, so not all 27, but in 60 member states. And we asked whether respondents trust Germany to defend European interests if it plays a leadership role in each of the following areas. So they had to tick areas where they trust Germany to take on this leadership position. And what was interesting is that there was quite a lot of support for Germany taking on leadership positions and kind of shaping EU positions on economic issues, on democracy and human rights. But when it came to actual geopolitical questions, handling the relationship with China or with Russia or indeed European defense, support dropped to the low 20s or below that. So only 17% of Europeans think that Germany can lead the EU or can positively shape the EU's positioning on China. So I think there's a long way to go. And yeah, despite what I said in point A, that there is a lot of lip service and there is support, point B kind of says, well, okay, but when you look at what's actually being done, it's not, the picture isn't quite as rosy. Third point, could all of this or will all of this change with the new German government? As you know, we just had an election and, very broadly speaking, the CDU, Merkel's party, lost a lot of support. So the center-right lost support, the center-left and the small parties, so the Social Democrats, SPD, and the small parties of Greens and FDP, won a lot of votes. And these three parties, SPD, Greens, and FDP, are currently in coalition negotiations and are likely to form what's called a traffic light coalition. So, if we get this traffic light coalition, will they change Germany's positioning on the EU and the EU as a strategic actor after the 16 years of Merkel? On the one hand, I would say, don't expect any major changes simply because German foreign policy tends to be quite focused on continuity. There is, very broadly speaking, there's agreement among the main parties as to Germany's role in the world and the relationships in the world. So it isn't, kind of major differences. However, on the other hand, we have seen a kind of general, though slow, but general change in German thinking over the last few years when it comes to these geopolitical questions. Most notably, I'd say, how Europe and Germany should position itself towards China and whether it needs to take on a stronger position. So I think there is a bit of a general change in German politics to take these challenges more seriously than we used to, and that we can't just focus on economic issues. And this is important, this belief, this change is particularly strong in the two smaller parties, the Greens and the FDP, which are basically guaranteed to be in the next government. And they have definitely adopted stronger positions, especially on human rights, or I would say willing to position Germany and the EU more in a more, I want to say, hawkish or muscular way towards China and Russia. So maybe there is a slow change, a bit of a change in this area, but yeah, don't expect any kind of wonders in this field. And I'll end it here with these kind of three very broad overview positions, and I'm happy to discuss all of those later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulrike, for this excellent introduction. And I think that it's not easy to speak about national position if you are not the member of government, but also could be an advantage. And in your case, we see it. So please, Joanna, the floor is yours. You will talk about the France, even you are from Germany, if I understand
exactly.
Well. So
it's decidedly very European tonight. So thank you, Dr. Milosevic and distinguished colleagues, dear members of the audience. I'm absolutely pleased to be here with you tonight. And thank you for having me in this most timely and interesting event. As Mira has already mentioned, there's a caveat to be made. Even though I'm going to be talking about the French position, I'm German, but I also hold French nationality. So you might have a little bit of an in-between look at France, but that might be not a bad thing. So as Ulrike already mentioned, there is definitely a geopolitical element to how countries see the EU as a strategic actor. And please allow me just a tiny recap in that sense, even though you are most certainly all aware of these aspects, but it's, I think, important to keep in mind that since the departure of the United Kingdom, the geopolitical twin of France, France is the only country in the European Union that holds a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, the only EU member with nuclear weapons. And even though we think of France mostly as having regional security interests, looking down south, so to say, towards the Mediterranean and Africa, is also the only EU member which has truly global interests due to its overseas departments and territories with the Blue Water Navy and troops pre-positioned on the other side of the globe. And together with such global importance and reach come global ambitions. And despite cooperating in many ways, France's strategic narrative centers to this day on French autonomy and on the rayonnement, the diffusion of its civilizational model. So from this rather off-the-cuff summary, we can already deduce that the relationship France has with the European Union is a bit ambivalent. On the one hand, the European project, which France is a founding member, is seen by France as a necessary answer, especially to American dominance in Europe and in the world, and a vehicle to enhance European and French power. And Ulrike has already talked about how Germany sees Europe. And I very much love this comment by Jan Tekau on what the EU is for Germany, a leadership avoidance team. So for France, it's really quite the opposite. It is a vehicle to enhance French power. And for France, French and European power is thought as inextricably tied. Something that we, for example, see in this expression souveraineté européenne that President Macron used in his famous speech at the Sorbonne in 2017. And it expresses well this French quest for European power in the international realm. And we also encountered this in another famous or infamous expression by Emmanuel Macron, autonomie stratégique, strategic autonomy. So on the one hand, the EU should be enhancing French and European power. But on the other hand, the European Union, being what it is, an incredibly complex mechanism of finding compromises among its 27 members, it's not always a suitable platform for French strategic thinking and acting because French ideas very often do not survive contact, at least not fully intact, with this very complex European reality. So next to being an instrument of power, the European Union is also an object, I would say, of immense frustration for the French. France has tried unsuccessfully after the Cold War to push the European Union as an alternative mechanism to NATO. Then when that did not work, it tried to, together with the United Kingdom at the end of the 1990s, to give the European Union at least the capacity to act in the foreign and security field. Again, French plans were watered down or downgraded in the process. And what I would call its most recent attempt, what we see right now, it is aiming at an economic military core centered around European defense industries as a central element of a European security strategy. So we've seen the kickoff of permanent structured cooperation, the European Defence Fund, the Directorate General of Defence Industry and Space, headed by a French commissioner. These are all crucial elements for the French, for the EU becoming an actor in the military industrial capacity sense of the word. So for the French, there cannot be really a consolidation of European sovereignty, that is this word again, in the realm of defense industry if there is not some sort of control over defense industries, research and development, space, cyber, and other disruptive and innovative technologies. So if that is not coming together, the EU will simply not be able to exist as a strategic actor. And one could also add, neither would its member states. So it's probably not an exaggeration to say that France has been a bit disappointed with the launching of permanent structured cooperation because it thought it was much too inclusive. and also with the outcome so far of the projects initiated under PESCO. And then we also had this downgrading of the European Defence Fund under the new European budget. And I also get the impression that the DG DGs of the European Commission is probably not as influential as the French would have hoped. So what are the French currently doing to push the EU as a strategic actor in the defense and security realm, at least? As you know, we have discussions that are currently underway regarding the strategic compass, the European Union's document for 2030, which is very ambitious, because given the differences in points of view on the subject of threats and security needs, it's supposed to provide an analysis of the threats facing EU countries, and also to determine responses in terms of objectives and means. And that compass should be finalized during the French presidency of the EU in the first half of next year. And I think France sees three dangers in this respect. The first being that it could be a weak and non-binding document coming out of these strategic compass discussions. Another thing that worries France is that it could be just some sort of complementary document to the much bigger show in town, which is the NATO new strategic concept that is also currently being developed to replace the last one of 2010. And they're supposed to be coming out almost at the same time, I mean, practically. And the last thing that is weighing on France's mind is the fact that this document, the compass, could be very ambitious and strongly worded, but then just sit there and not do anything. So that would be, in a nutshell, my first thoughts on France and its vision on the EU as a strategic actor. So as enhancing French and European power, but as a power vector that is quite difficult to handle and causing some frustration to the French.
So thank you very much, Joanna. We have here these statements of Joanna and Ulrike about the driver, as one of the topics is that Germany and France are drivers of the European Union and a kind of necessary leadership of the European Union. But we have another two countries here, and I give the floor now to Roberto. Roberto, please tell us from the Italian point of view, how do you see this issue on the EU as a strategic actor? Is it possible, and what could be a contribution of Italy? So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, Mira, and thank you in terms of the organization of the event. Yes, in fact, the two previous presentations have set the stage so that I can save some of the more general remarks, because clearly the perception of each country can slightly differ, but of course the context is essentially the same, and it's very hard to view it in a completely different way. Some of the objective factors that have been mentioned are difficulties. For example, this idea of déjà vu, of having been here before many times, I think is common to all of us. And it's certainly common to the political leaders and to people in the military sphere, people working more on a technology industrial side, because it is true. We have been through these debates in slightly different ways for a long time. And that tells you something about how difficult it is to move it forward. Okay, so as a very general statement. Now, let me start to give you an Italian perspective on this. I was rereading a few days ago the 2015 White Book for International Security and Defense, which is actually the latest very broad Italian framework. And of course, it is already out of date, being 6 years old. But I was a bit struck. I had forgotten how strong the point was made in that document, that everything that Italy would do in terms of strategy and defense would have to be based on the idea that both NATO and the EU were exactly equally important and crucial to Italy's national interest. And this is repeated like 1,000 times in the document. So you clearly see that this is a problem. or there's an issue there, or you wouldn't find that, repetition being so clearly deliberate. And you can see this exactly in very strong terms, especially with the current government, the Draghi government, because this government has been trying to, again, re-establish exactly this very difficult balance. After a few years of, I would say, a little bit of tactical confusion with certain openings to China, of course, with the Trump issue that has made it extremely difficult for all of us as Europeans to deal with the US side of the equation. So I think Draghi has really been trying to reset Italy exactly where it was supposed to be with the 2015 strategic document, in a place where you have the EU and NATO being functionally useful to each other. And of course, this is very easy said, but very difficult to do, to realize, to make it happen in practice, for the reasons that have been to some extent alluded to. And I'll go back in a moment to the specific lesson of Afghanistan that perhaps we are trying to draw in terms of European defense, especially in terms of strategic autonomy. But one step backwards for a moment. I see a specific problem with Italy's approach to European security and defense, which is very similar to what Ulrike has been explaining to us in terms of the German debate. It's similar in the sense that the level of lip service is extremely high, both in terms of leadership, establishment, very well-informed individuals, but also in terms of public opinion. So opinion polls are quite clear. This is very popular. Now, the problem is that we never attach a price tag and a set of specific commitments to the statement, to the general statement. So it is almost impossible to know exactly what the level of support would be if any political leader would come up with a price tag. I'm oversimplifying, but I see this is a problem that I believe is again, similar to what Germany has been experiencing over a number of years, that because you can make it into a general statement, it is rather popular. But when if it had to come down to specific numbers, and again, not just numbers in terms of economic resources, financial efforts, but also in terms of commitments to integrate, I'm thinking, for example, industrial policy, then it would become more problematic. Again, even in Italy, I believe. Another problem with this debate that I see from an Italian perspective is that, for example, the pandemic did offer some opportunities to think of Europe in a more, let's say, forward-looking way, especially from an Italian perspective, given that Europe has actually been very beneficial in financial terms to Italian reforms, will be for the next few years. Italy is one of the main beneficiaries, essentially, of the current configuration in Europe. And yet, again, I think our political leaders have been very, let's say, absent-minded when it comes to actually, I would say, connecting the dots. For example, the pandemic and the fact that there are complex emergencies to deal with where Europe would be extremely, extremely relevant in the future. But this connection has rarely been made in a very direct fashion. The fact, for example, that trade and technology are closely tied to very sensitive technologies and elements of sovereignty. Again, this is rarely made into a very coherent argument. It's exactly what exploded in our face with the China deal of a couple of years ago, especially with strong US recriminations in that case, but it would equally apply to a European consensus, I think. Now, on the positive side, I think the sense that European defense and even strategic autonomy could move forward would have very significant positive implications for Italy. So I see an opportunity here. For instance, I think it would be a possible way to rebalance geographically one of the problems that we as Italians constantly see with NATO, which is that it's way too oriented towards the northeast and certainly not enough toward the southeast. Now, the EU would probably be somewhat more ready to accept the argument that we should shift some of the resources to the southeast. I believe the balance of power would probably make this easier. for the EU than it is for NATO. Another aspect, I think, growing interest and awareness of cyber threats, which again could be an area where the EU could be much more active in the near future. So again, this will be an interesting argument to make in favor of a level of strategic autonomy. And of course, there's the industrial sector, where there will be a lot of interest. We all know that this needs consolidation across the board, so perhaps the EU level could help. Another issue that perhaps is a little bit of an overstretch for now, but could become more, let's say, practical over the next few years, is the Sahel region. Right now, as we know, there's a multilateral mission underway in the region, which is a very, I would say, a quite ambitious mission, Takuba, but it is not an EU mission. And I would add, somewhat sadly, as usual, because it could have happened differently this time as well as in the past. I'm thinking even Lebanon, for example, UNIFIL 2, could have pretty easily be an EU mission for a number of reasons, but it didn't happen. And that's purely political will. It is not a purely technical issue. It is more in terms of political will. So for all these reasons, I think there would be significant interest and even active interest on the part of Italy if we could move the debate forward into some of these areas. Now, a couple of final points on how to do it. I think PESCO was mentioned already, nothing to add there. There were very high hopes, but for a number of reasons, the technical side of PESCO didn't, let's say, meet the expectations. But for example, Italy was almost enthusiastic. I think we were in 25 PESCO projects, I think as many as France, or nearly the same numbers. I would add, there is, yes, from an Italian perspective, in a way, joining together Johanna and Ulrike's presentations, there is, let's say, a French problem and a German problem, which seem to be exactly the two sides of the same coin. I mean, the French are seen here, again, oversimplifying a bit, as overly zealous. I mean, they're even too enthusiastic about this idea of sovereignty, strategic autonomy, and so on, understandably, but a little bit too much. So it sounds a little bit as if it's actually a French leadership that they are after, which would be legitimate, of course, but controversial. And the Germans, of course, are a little bit too passive in this debate. We would like to see Germany more active, especially after Brexit. Because let's not forget, Brexit is in the background here, but it's been a big blow for a number of these issues. I mean, it's an opportunity if you want to see it that way, but it is a pretty serious problems in terms of resources and even, I would say, strategic outlook, at least potentially. Last point, and then we may have time later for some general observations, but last point on Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan was a moment where I personally saw, again, all of a sudden, all the, I wouldn't say the bad reflexes, but the risky reflexes across Europe. For example, recriminations that the United States did not involve us in a decision or alert us to the decision. Well, that's plainly ridiculous. We knew exactly what was going to happen with the Biden administration. I mean, not exactly, but we suspected that something like that might happen. We were involved from the beginning. We've been there 20 years. We know the place, we know the people, we know the decision making, we know the American leadership in charge. So I agree that Biden made a tactical mistake, and he certainly mismanaged the evacuation, no doubt. But the political argument that has been made across Europe, almost everywhere across Europe, that we were somehow, let's say, betrayed by a sudden decision by the US doesn't really stand to me. And you cannot, in a way, you cannot make the case for European strategic autonomy only when the United States misbehaves, because it would seem to me that you need it anyway. If you need it always. You need it because you think there are strategic interests that you want to pursue as the EU. Of course, with all due respect for NATO and everything. But if you don't believe so, you then only mention the problem of strategic autonomy when the US does something you dislike, which to me is a little bit suspect as an argument. And very final point, really, the way that many people across Europe, I would say especially Brussels, not so much in the capitals, but especially in Brussels, immediately picked up on the Kabul evacuation to say, well, why don't you go back to this idea of having about 5,000, high readiness troops to do something like the Kabul evacuation? Well, it's an incredible step back from what we said, for example, in 1999, which is a long time ago. I mean, the Helsinki headline goals were, it talked about 50,000, 60,000, which is really a strategic vision. At least it's the beginning of a strategic vision. But to say that you want to be able to evacuate Kabul airport, to me, has nothing to do with strategic autonomy. It's just looking at the latest, episode, so to say. Okay, I'll stop here. And again, and I agree with most that has been said earlier, so I won't repeat what I agree with. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Roberto, for introducing NATO, for introducing transatlantic relationship here, because talking about the EU strategic autonomy, I agree, really, it's impossible to separate of the transatlantic relationship and NATO. So now I will give the floor to Ignacio Cosido, last but not least. Ignacio, please tell us what is the Spanish vision of all this mess in which we are currently.
So, Mira, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank Mira and FAES the opportunity to organize this joint seminar with Universidad Francisco de Vitoria, with this perfect organization that Mira gives us. I will try to be a little shorter because so we have some minutes for the debate. The first point for me will be that traditionally it's not clear that Spain could have a vision or could have a project for defense and security in Europe. I think that we were a quite marginal partner in this field. But at the same time, I think that right now we could have now an opportunity to be more active and to participate in this very beginning of European security and defense policy. First, because I think that Spain is one of the most pro-European countries, at least in terms of public opinion. When the Eurobarometer asks to the Spanish, almost 90% of them, they feel very European and they support more European integration. It's true that at the same time, Spain is one of the countries that have a probably low level of strategic culture. When we talk about defense spending, and when we talk about how to participate in some military operations, the Spanish public opinion is not usually is not very in favor of this. But anyway, I think that the Spanish public opinion support a more political integration of European Union. And for me, that's the first point if you want to talk about defense and you want to talk about security. The second point is that we have quite a strong political consensus. It's true that in the political party system in Spain, now we have some new actors in the right and in the left, that they don't participate of this political consensus of socialist and conservative liberals party, Partido Popular and Socialist Party, that they were very, very pro-European, and I think they will support with any problem, any kind of more integrated defense and security policy. But my perception, and it's difficult to know because we will have next general election in 2 years, is that these two big parties will maintain enough power to improve this European policy, and the anti-European parties will not have the possibility of to be in the government. So I hope that we could maintain this political consensus. Thirdly, it's true that when you look at the defense spending in Spain, I think it's almost the lowest one in Europe, maybe with the exception of Luxembourg, in terms of GNP. And it's clear if we would like to be a relevant partner in terms of defense, European defense, we must spend more money. That's clear for me. It's no other option. But it's true also that we have armed forces, that they are quite professional. I think we participate almost in any mission from European Union, from Congo to Sahel, from the 90s to right now. So I think that we are maybe not very powerful in terms of military capacities, but we are quite valuable in terms of our participation in military operation. So if we could have more budget, probably we will be a relevant partner, mainly in an European Union in which United Kingdom is out of the Union. So I think the balance of power could be more interesting for a country like Spain. And maybe the most important point is if Spain would like really to play a political role in the European Union, because traditionally we were very behind France, mainly in security and defense policy, sometimes behind German also, but I think we don't have our own voice in terms of the debate. So for me, the main point in order to have this opportunity to be more relevant is more political attitude, is to have to participate in a political design about what we would like for Europe in terms of defense, in terms of security, and to be much more active than we used to see. And if I can, I say that I will be very short, but just in 1 minute, Mira, in order maybe to open the debate, just 3 very, very short ideas about how we can try to build an European Union that could be an strategic actor. No? The first is for me that we need to pass from words to deeds. No? What is important now is action, is to do things, is not to speak so much about that, but try to put new steps in this way, in this process, to build a real defense capacity for Europe. No? We talk a lot about strategic autonomy, and I say you don't have to talk so much about strategic autonomy. Maybe you have to exercise strategic autonomy in some case, no? And really, that's the point. Secondly, in the very tradition of the European Union, I see this security and defense dimension like a gradualist process. It's no one-day task. It's not a question to reform a treaty. I think it's a question to work with one vision, of course, with a political goal, but really work day to day. And for me, it's very intelligent to begin by the industrial base, because clearly we have there a common interest. I think Europe is very, out of the technological race with the United States, with China, and really we need to integrate our industrial capacities if we would like to be relevant in this field. And everybody will agree, I think, about that. So, and we will create some kind of interest between the different countries that could be very positive in terms of improve the political process. Secondly, to build capacities. And thirdly, to build the strategy and the common policy. So it's not the way in which we begin the policy, then the capacities, then the industrial base, but I will begin the industrial base, the capacities, and then the strategy and the political process. And the last point is, I will focus European Union much more about, mainly in terms of common capacities, in new capacities, in complementary capacities to the traditional military capacities. I think it will be great if European Union could improve our capacity in cybersecurity, in the space, in drones. So in those capacities that from the national base, we don't have enough. And this capacity is like a space in which really we need to join our efforts, because in other way it could be impossible to have this kind of capacities. So don't focus in tanks, in planes, in traditional military vessels. Just try to think in these new capacities that we will need for the kind of conflict that we will have in the future.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you, and really you put on the table different issues. I mean, meanwhile, I remember today, I think that you have heard that Colin Powell, former Secretary of State of the United States, has died, and one of his very famous affirmation is show me your budget and I will tell you your strategy. So in honor to Colin Powell, I please feel free to comment, or I will not repeat and resume your interventions because you are here. Just I don't want to waste time on it. But I have a question, actually two questions. But please feel free to comment anything of what somebody say on the panel. My question is: we talk about strategy and the possibility and how the European Union can become a strategic actor, but all of you and all of us, we know that to have a strategy, first of all, we have to have a common vision. We have to know what we want to be when we grow up, what is our objective, what we really do want for in this case for a strategy and security and defense of the European Union. So do you think, all of you highlighted that there is a high popular support in your countries for the European Union, but Roberto said exactly, I think that that exactly does not mean that is a support in economic terms or really economic military terms. So first question is, in your opinion, is there political will in current European Union, not only in your countries, but in Brussels, to build strategic autonomy and to make of the European Union a strategic actor? Even Ursula von der Leyen, Josep Borrell, many other European leaders speak that Europe have to speak with language of power, that Europe, Ursula von der Leyen said that this commission is geopolitical commission, and so on. We have narratives about it, but I'm not sure that we have political will. This is one part. And second question, if you like to mention, is there any sense for the European Union to become strategic actor out of the transatlantic relationship and out of NATO. Now, what Roberto started to explain, but I would like to hear from Ulrike and Joanna and Ignacio, of course, what do you think about it? No, or just to, I think that Roberto is clear in it. No, what is there any sense for Europe to be strategic actor out of the transatlantic relationship? So thank you. Maybe we again start with Ulrike and follow our order.
Sure, yeah, I'll keep this short. So on the political will, I would put it this way. There's a massive political will of the EU becoming a stronger geopolitical strategic actor, however you want to call it, in Brussels and in the EU. I think this is very clear. The EU institutions, you mentioned the relevant names, they've been pushing for this for a while. I think they actually use the reactions to Afghanistan in a way to strengthen this further. So I think the political will in Brussels is definitely there. The political will in the member states, I'd say in most of them, some quite honestly maybe too small or too unused to kind of thinking about geopolitical and strategic implications that this isn't exactly super high on their agenda, but they will still support it. The problem isn't that there isn't support for the general idea of, yeah, the EU should become more of a strategic actor. The problem is that different countries see it differently as to in which direction this should go. And to be very blunt, I don't think it is possible for the EU to become a stronger strategic geopolitical actor in the sense of, a political union that takes strong positions and adopts strong positions towards other players at 27. I don't see this because we have different views when it comes to the big questions, be it our relationship with China, be it our relationship with Russia, be it our relationship with the US. And as long as we try to have a position that suits all EU27, this is not going to work. And that's the kind of sad truth. And I know a lot of people are worried about core Europe and all of this, but quite honestly, I'd say this is the only way that this can reliably happen. And then being a strategic actor kind of outside the US or without the US, I mean, I pretty much agree with Roberto here. I feel that the discussion on European strategic autonomy or European sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, is way too focused on the US. It's always, if the US does something, or it is about, how close we want to be to the US. I'm a big believer in the transatlantic relationship, and yet I'm a major supporter of European strategic autonomy, because I do believe that, we can definitely become a stronger actor in our own right, and that may mean very often aligning with the US because it is in our interest and because they are important partners. I'm all for this, but sometimes it may mean not aligning with them, and that's fine too. So I actually think that this kind of juxtaposition is a bit annoying and sometimes pushed by those Europeans that worry that the EU becoming a stronger European actor may alienate us from the US, but I feel that often we have this discussion and there's no real reason. And if quite honestly, if I were the US, I also wouldn't be too worried about European strategic autonomy. I think, in the end, this would probably be a good thing for them as well. But yeah.
Thank you. Joanna.
Yeah, I want to start by an observation. It's very interesting that we are here united tonight as basically 4 big countries of the European Union. And we have no small countries, we also have no Nordics, and we have no Eastern European Union countries. And it's very important to imagine that there's this diversity of views. And what for us is very logical, that we have to work on creating capacity and on becoming less strategically immature. These things might be completely not hearable if you move towards the East. So that is just a fact, that we have these diversities of views. And the next comment I would like to make is on this feeling that we always have, that we find ourselves at the same moment in time, this kind of Groundhog Day situation, that we're forced to live the exact same sequence of events And it starts normally with some sort of outside shock, either the US being grumpy or Russia invading some country. And then we think, oh God, we might need to do something. And then there is a big flurry of activities and everybody gets really excited. This now is the right moment and this is going to be decisive. Then it gets all watered down and then we go back to normal. So I think this is not really a bug, but this is really the feature of the system that we live in that produces security in Europe. We are in this kind of complex interlocking groupings of defense corporations where we have a multitude of actors. We have NATO, which is the prime security guarantor, thanks to the American security guarantee. And let's face it, I would say like a massive majority does not want to change that. So there's not going to be much movement on that. And we have the EU, we have bilateral corporations, we have minilateral corporations outside. So all this is like a giant chessboard where each country has their own interests and tries to kind of pursue its own strategy. So this will never align. So I agree with Ulrike that we're probably not going to have decisive movements. So either there's going to be a much bigger shock, and that can only be the United States really walking away. And then we're really in trouble because we have to become adults really quickly. And we have seen the figures and that have been put out by various people like the IISS or the Kerber Foundation, who did scenario gaming of what it would take for Europeans to take care of their own security without the Americans. And that would be 10 to 15 years of hard work and billions and billions of euros, which we currently don't have. So probably we're going to be quite happy to do anything to prevent that from happening. And that brings us to this upcoming European moment, next European moment, which is the colliding of, or the coinciding of the strategic compass and the NATO strategic concept. So obviously there's going to be some quid pro quo of us reorganizing our transatlantic relationship and at the same time having to give a bit more. So maybe that might be something that will push us in the direction. But I'm a bit hesitant on the United States always being aligned with us becoming more responsible and more, let's say, not independent, but capable, because we have seen also some rather hostile reactions from the United States when we wanted to get serious in terms of industrial cooperation. So there are some contradictions here. So what I would expect is that the trend that we already see, that European countries use European security initiatives to actually reinforce NATO will continue. And that will be the biggest driving force, and also the sale argument in other parts of Europe, a bit further east and north, to say, yes, let's do that. That might be really good. And it's also going to be great for the Atlantic Alliance. Well, that's not going to make my country, entre guillemets, very happy, but it's probably the most likely outcome that I see on the horizon.
Thank you. Thank you. The strong European Union as a strategic actor definitely would be better and kind of reinforced of the NATO. So, Roberto.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'll try to connect some of the things that I've heard and some of the questions to some extent. It seems to me that one of the problems we have with this US issue is that the US connections is inescapable, I think, in any case. Let's put it this way. If I were to envision an EU with some of the capabilities, for example, those of the Helsinki headline goals, let's take that just as a starting point, 5 years from now, let's say, and with a doctrine that in a way lists a number of scenarios in which we would like to be able to act as the EU, okay? In any case, even at that stage, you would have to coordinate a number of activities, a number of issues, a number of strategic problems with the United States. So in that sense, I think it is inescapable. But at the same time, I agree, for example, to some extent with Johanna, in a sense that there will always be some hysterical reactions from Washington every now and then. There will be hysterical reactions from exactly some of the smaller countries in the EU. We have to face that. That's democracy in a way, meaning internal democracy within the EU context. It is right, it is true, and it is a problem. But I think, for instance, there's one issue where we could be slightly more direct in having this conversation. Whenever I hear, the discussion of China, what should the Europeans do to meet some of the expectations Washington has that we would help them contain China and all the rest? Well, that's essentially policy. I mean, that's diplomacy. And of course, yes, economics and technology. But in terms of military issues, the United States is expecting absolutely nothing from the Europeans in the Indo-Pacific. They don't need the Europeans in the Indo-Pacific. They will never expect us to be decisive in the Indo-Pacific. Let's face it. Even, the British know exactly that their role is marginal, to be honest. It is very, very welcome to the US, but it is marginal. It's a diplomatic statement, okay? Now, what I think the EU really could do that would be appreciated in Washington is, for example, we should take care of our neighborhood. That would be highly appreciated in many ways. It means, of course, the Western Balkans, and it's complicated. It means the southern shore of the Mediterranean. It is very complicated. It is a little bit of maritime routes, for example. For example, let's not forget that the Mediterranean Suez Canal, they have become a connection, not just, let's say, for Europe and North Africa. This is where most of the containers from China go through. So it is a global issue. That could be, for example, one of our contributions to global security in a sense that the Americans would easily understand. And that's something that's probably more feasible than making a token contribution to the Indo-Pacific, which would be quite marginal, to be honest. Controversial and marginal at the same time. So I really believe the make or break question for the EU is the neighborhood. Of course, it's a broad neighborhood, and it's a bad neighborhood in many ways. But that's where we should start thinking more pragmatically. I also like the one comment made by Ignacio, for example. He really said it perfectly. Let's say strategic autonomy is not a statement. It is not even an ambition. It is a process. It is, we are here, we want to get there. Realistically, that's the way to get there, and it is a process. That's the way that it should be explained also to our public opinions. Not as something that you say one day and it happens on the next day, simply because you have made the statement. It will be a process. It will be quite a long process, but it's also a more realistic and serious way of dealing with it. And of course, it has the industrial component, which is very practical, and it needs resources, but it also has its advantages. So in that sense, it could be, I wouldn't say a win-win proposition. It would be still complicated, but it's more practical than just saying, we want to be able to do things 20 years from now everywhere, which is not really credible. And one last point, I see a little bit of a dilemma whenever I hear, let's say I'm a bit worried whenever I hear very ambitious statements from Brussels, meaning the European institutions, because sometimes I see the risk, again, repeating itself, that we move a little bit higher in terms of the ambition, but then we immediately go usually in terms of normative power, which takes you away from the capabilities. It takes you completely away because, you start making these very lofty statements, which could be part of a strategy, of course. But it seems to me that it takes the attention away from the very practical things we could do. Again, I was always surprised that we couldn't do Lebanon together as the EU with an EU flag instead of the UN flag. It's a little bit of a fixation for me because I think it was a major wasted opportunity, for example. But the same probably is true of Takuba, who knows? In any case, I think we have to be very practical. We need to go step by step, and the political leaders should be able to explain step by step where we're going, and that it will take time, but that's a direction where we want to be. And to close on this, at that point, I wouldn't worry too much about the US reactions, because if we go practical, then gradually I think their concerns would be we could smooth the debate if we go the practical way rather than making the big statement and then forgetting about that for a couple of years. So that's what I suggest could help us move along. But of course, all the problems remain there, including the wonderful quote from Powell. Yes, the budget will tell you a lot about how serious you are. I mean, how much money you're willing to put into that. And of course, especially today, it wouldn't be easy for any political leader. I can only imagine anyone going on TV prime time saying, my fellow citizens, by the way, we should raise the defense budget. It's not easy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that even the strategic autonomy knows all about the economy and the budget, and 2% to invest in defense for as it is agreement with NATO, but it is clear that current politicians are not able to say that they will cut money from welfare state and to invest in defense, because one of the objectives of this kind of seminars and this grant of Ministry of Defense of Spain is just to spread culture of security and defense and try to explain to people that security has a price, has a cost, and that just to put on the table more conscience and awareness of the citizens that is necessary to invest in it. So, Nacho Cosido, you are here.
Thank you, Mira, and you made a very tricky question about does exist a political will to this strategic autonomy in Europe? No, and the first I will say is, well, it depends. No, it's very unbalanced support. In France, of course, they are the champions of this strategic autonomy. No. In Germany, well, they have more doubts, yes and not, no? And Poland, well, is completely against this idea of our own European defense, no? But what is important for me, Mira, is that I think that the public opinion supports more the idea of, I don't know, strategic autonomy, but to have more compromise in Europe about our security that probably our governments. And I was reading, a paper of GMF this weekend that asking mainly to the young people, and the trend clearly for the young, the new generation, the new European generations, is that they support much more that European Union, that Europe could play a role in this multipolar world, no, in which China, United States, and they would like to have a more visible Europe, a more strategic Europe, that the old generation. So I think in terms of the long term, maybe we will have some opportunity to build this political volunteer, this political will. No? And the relation with NATO, that's well, I'm a little older, so I recognize that I was quite comfortable with the framework of the Cold War, no? In which everything was more clear, probably, at least in strategic terms than now. But things change. So are the Americans, they have the will to pay for our security in the future? United States is looking more Atlantic and Europe, or they are looking China and Asia. So for me, it's not a question of what you wish, but it's a question of really the reality. Things change. My perception is that United States will not able to guarantee or will not wish to guarantee our security by free in the future. So we have to do something. And maybe more integrated European defense, or maybe a stronger national defense, but we have to do something, because this so comfortable situation in which United States pay for our security, and if it's necessary they go to the war because us, I think will not be possible in the future. So we have to do something. And really, I know it's very political, but I don't see this contradiction between that a stronger European defense means a weaker NATO. I don't see it. I think, furthermore, I think that right now with the Biden administration, we have some opportunity, or not with Biden administration, I think in general, in the strategic thinking in the United States, they are much more open to a more European defense, a stronger European defense than they were in the past. Really, I think they begin to change the mentality in terms that for them is not so much a threat for a NATO disintegration, but it's an opportunity to pay less for our security. So I think they are much more open to support European defense than in the past. But really, it's the last thing I say. But if I thought that more European defense means less NATO, I didn't support this process. I think because NATO right now is mainly thinking in Russia. For me, it's so vital for Europe. But really, strategic things are changed. Secondly, I think we have an opportunity window because things are changed also in the United States, and we have this negative perception about European defense.
Thank you very much. We spend our time. We don't always in this kind of discussions. Finally, I realize we are out of time. we thank you very much for your participation. I know that many questions really still are very open. I hope that we will have opportunity to see each other face to face, maybe next year, and really discuss this issue, this topic, not only by Zoom, but later in the dinner after. I hope so. So thank you very much again for joining us, and I apologize to our public and which sent some questions. We don't have time for them, but maybe in next two seminars, as I would like to repeat, supported by Ministry of Defense, to spread security and defense culture. Maybe we will respond to them. So thanks again, and to our public, see you next Monday with another seminar, and bye. Have a nice.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.
Thank
you very much. Thanks, everyone.
And bravo to the interpreters. Bye.
Bye.